King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. King Gizzard is a large psychedelic indie rock, rap, metal, electronica, funk, instrumental band from Australia who gained notoriety for their constant genre shifting and endless barrage of album releases during the 2010s and onward. Their creativity is truly something to behold, due to not only the quantity of media but the quality of much of their releases. The reason for the shift in presence was addressed by the band itself in an Instagram post. Hello, friends. A PSA to those unaware. Spotify CEO Daniel Ek invests millions in AI military drone technology. We just removed our music from the platform. Can we put pressure on these Dr. Evil Tech Bros to do better? Join us on another platform. They took a stand to straight up delete every record off of their Spotify profile, and now all that's left is a desert compared to what was once a thriving account with millions of listeners. From what I can tell, they do have a full release presence in places like Bandcamp, a more ethically fair business towards artists, as far as I'm aware. There may be a chance that this group may return in the future, but I can only guess as to how long that may last. Bruit. If King Gizzard's departure from Spotify wasn't enough to bring awareness to Spotify's shady practices, perhaps Bruit can solidify that concept. Bruit, or Bruit, is an industrial post-rock band from France that covers thematic concepts of industrialization, power, greed, and war, creating a hauntingly ethereal environment throughout its tracks. Their most recent release this year, The Age of Ephemerality, is a full concept album that is by far one of my favorite of this year, with their live performances on YouTube even more powerful than the record versions in my opinion. The reason for the band's lack of presence in Spotify is, well, I'll read an excerpt from their official release Parasite, and it should paint a pretty clear picture as to why this is. Long before streaming, the industry was already transforming art into a product of mass consumption and crushing artists to create a monopoly. The term music industry implies that art is created in huge quantities like cars built on an assembly line, leading music companies to raise artists like chickens on a factory farm. Why are the artists underpaid by the platforms? How can Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, use the money generated by the artists to invest in weapons? Is art meant to cause death? Look for the short circuit. Look for the craft. Look for alternatives. Look for us elsewhere. We believe that sound is the most primitive link between humans, a language that sometimes escapes meaning but finds its way freely. Bruit means noise, and at the end of everything is noise, or at worst, chatter. We love you. Tatsuno Yamashita. Now this guy is by far one of the most elusive artists I've come across online. This man is a good definition of dreamy city pop, but every time you look for his releases as an American, you're either met with single official releases or unofficial album releases that get instantly removed off YouTube. The reason, despite constantly reaching top charts in Japan, is a little complicated. All I've gathered from conversations online is that he chooses not to release on major streaming platforms simply because he doesn't like them, and creative people largely get taken advantage of in his eyes. Today, he lives in his 70s, so more than likely his philosophy stems from an era where worldwide presence was impossible, and purchasing physical copies locally was the fundamental way to share and express creativity among your community. But as times change, there are just simply more ways to discover and support artists than to blow off every platform to the point of attempting obscurity. Biggest problem with this approach especially is that though official international sales are somewhat possible, the current presidency's tariffs in place just have made buying his physical copies completely impossible. For all of his success, I would think that he's a prime example of someone who takes the elusiveness of online presence a little too far. And I think it's part of an older way of thinking than rather seeing the impact his music would have on people if he made it easier to be accessible. So unless he provides purchasable virtual copies online, I guess it's back to downloading through MP3 to listen to this artist. Okay, so the rest of these artists are on Spotify but are missing a few albums in their accounts and thought that they would be notable enough to mention here. The Deal by Sumac. Not Smack, but Sumac is one of the best doom metal bands I've ever heard of without a doubt. And this album release is absolutely one of their better releases that I feel isn't talked about enough online. Flood by Boris, specifically the song Flood 3. It's like Pink Floyd levels of existentially intense and a real noise rock hybrid of a concept album. 4 Postcards by Hiroshi Yoshimura. For ambient fans into that Nintendo 64 aquatic soundtrack nostalgia, this is a missing album that is arguably one of his best works. Death Grip's self-titled EP, a great experimental punk hip-hop noise band. You've most likely heard of them if you're chronically online. This release is most likely not present because of copyright issues in some of the tracks. The White Goblin by Masayoshi Takanaka. Although arguably his best releases are available on Spotify already, you can actually find a few albums like Rainbow Goblin's release on YouTube, which has a number of great songs not on Spotify. Most recently, there has been a lot of presence, but that doesn't stop the possibility that they will be pulled out at some point. CB Murdoch, The Green, a really cool gent band for those into Meshuggah. This is like Car Bomb levels of Off-Time Signatures and Nasty Chugs. No idea why it's been buried into obscurity though. And lastly, literally almost every Vaporwave album I can think of. From Blank Banshee to Macintosh Plus, artists like Saint Pepsi's entire discography just has too many copyrighted samples, but has some of the most futuristic and dreamy, nostalgic sounds ever heard. So this is just a tiny list compared to all the releases not available in Spotify. Of course, there are infinitely more, so I encourage people to share more unreleased albums either here on YouTube or otherwise, because I just think this is a fascinating topic that doesn't get mentioned enough. Anyway, moral of the story is, YouTube is great, support the artists in independent ways, but I urge everyone to explore some more outside of Spotify. See ya.